Today I have for you one of the most perfect tenor voices ever to make records. Power, beauty of tone, range, everything that makes for great singing was to be found in this tenor's voice. Before I tell you his name, let me begin by playing one of the most famous songs ever written. You Are My Heart's Delight, from Lehar's opera, The Land of Smiles. This great melody will always be associated with Richard Tauber, but not even he could produce the glorious flood of sound we hear from today's singer. And if you listen carefully, you may pick up a clue to his identity.
Jag ödmjukt för din fot vill falla och lyda allt du vill befalla. Du endast du, all ro, tröst av din smekande röst.
Well, did you spot the clue to the singer's name? It was in the words, which were not all in the usual German, but were partly in Swedish. Yes, our tenor today is that king of Swedish singers, Jussi Björling. Perhaps I should try to place him accurately among the other truly great lyric tenors. He was 20 years younger than Beniamino Gigli. He was 10 years older than Giuseppe Di Stefano and 14 years older than his fellow Swede, Nikolai Gedda. When Jussi was born in February 1911, his father was already quite a well-known tenor, and by the time Jussi was 9 or 10, he was touring the United States in a singing group with his father and his two brothers. Probably no singer has ever spent a greater proportion of his life in front of the public, for Jussi was making regular appearances well before he was 10 and was still singing perfectly when his life ended prematurely of a heart attack at the age of 49. Tragedy struck the Björling family early. Both his parents died before Jussi was 16, and the finances became very tight. Luckily, he was encouraged to sing at an audition before a leading Swedish tenor, who was so impressed that he urged the opera house in Stockholm to finance the young lad's training. Thus it was that a promising talent which might have disappeared without trace was given a thorough musical education, and the world was enabled to hear his God-given voice in the opera houses of the world. So swift was Jussi's progress that he found himself singing leading roles in his very early 20s. Unfortunately, many of his earliest records survive. They show already the full, rounded sound of the later, mature singer, but they also show a surprising nervousness, which could be seen as a warning of things to come. Let me show you what I mean by playing two of his records from that early period. In the first, he's the crafty and unlovable Duke of Mantua in Verdi's Rigoletto. In this aria, made amazingly when the singer was only 19, the Duke says that one woman is really very much like any other, questa o quella. Björling recorded it several times after this early first attempt, and he never made the bodged job of the ending, which we hear on this occasion. A more established singer would have insisted on retaking the effort, for one note is appallingly flat.
Oi kvinnor, jag älskar er alla, men ni bojor kan ingen mig sluta. Jag är kring blott vill jag njuta i tusing och flyktig och torr. Aktar glödande blickar vi kalla, vill jag ila från stiger till stiger. Men nu, den enda jag väger till den andra längtar jag bort. Och jag till den andra längtar jag bort. Den skönaste kan mig tvingas beständigt i kärleken vara. När den så till tro vill bespara, ty hans kärlek är blott slaveri. Varje fara jag aktar förringa, jag åt älskar en svart sjuka snappar. Från en argus mitt byd jag kastar om vill lypa, jag nog väger mig fri. Och jag vill lypa, jag nog väger mig fri.
That was the 19-year-old Björling in an aria from Rigoletto. The next example is even more puzzling. This famous show-off aria from Trovatore appears to have been sung at a lower and therefore easier pitch. I suppose it's just possible that the turntable was rotating at the wrong speed, but I think it much more likely that the young man was still unsure of his powers. Surprising, because we are 4 years later than the Rigoletto excerpt. See what you think.
Ready
Whatever the explanation of that low-key Di quella pira from Trovatore, Björling's progress was swift. In the mid-1930s, he sang Radames in Aida at the Vienna State Opera and made equally successful appearances in Paris, London, Salzburg, and New York. Everyone who saw him says he was never much of a stage actor, but his voice so commanded attention that nobody really cared whether he acted or not. And as a concert artist, he was in great demand, singing lyrical trifles as beautifully as he sang great dramatic arias. Here he is, for example, recorded in Stockholm in 1937, singing O Sole Mio by Di Capua. I suppose a rough English translation would be, You Are My Sunshine. Björling, aged 26, singing O Sole Mio. Although, as you heard, he sings that song very straight, compare him with Pavarotti's extravagance, for example, you must have noticed that the richness of his voice conveyed emotion even when he seems not to be trying. One of his greatest roles was as Cavaradossi in Puccini's melodrama Tosca. By Act 3, the villainous chief of police, Baron Scarpia, has not only tortured Cavaradossi, but has also condemned him to death by firing squad for harbouring an escaped political prisoner. In his prison cell, tenors spend a lot of their time in prison cells, don't they? Cavaradossi asks for paper to write a last letter to his beloved Tosca. This leads him into the emotional aria When the Stars Were Shining. In this record, Jussi Björling, recorded later in his absolute prime, gives us not only some powerful emotion, but some wonderfully controlled quiet singing as well, while never letting the musical line get lost. Björling saying, "And now I die despairing," in the last act of Tosca. Despite his success, Björling had great difficulty finding happiness. The pianist, Ivor Newton, his accompanist on several occasions, described him as difficult, obstinate, and lazy. He had few real friends, one of the best being the American baritone Robert Merrill, with whom he made perhaps the best recorded version of the Pearl Fishers duet by Bizet. If this program had been a little longer, I should certainly have included it here, but I've had to ration myself instead to a short aria from Fedora by Giordano. Amor ti vieta is a passionate declaration of love. Every great tenor has recorded it, but this, I think, is the winner. Amor ti vieta, from Fedora by Giordano. Throughout the 1950s, Björling's operatic home was the Metropolitan Opera House, New York. He seldom learnt new roles, but his performances of the standard repertoire were always sold out. During that time, he made many superb recordings. For me, the best are all by Puccini. Complete versions of Manuel Lescaut, partnered by Lucia Albanese, of Turandot, partnered by his fellow Swede, the mighty-voiced Birgit Nilsson, and of La Bohème with Victoria de Los Angeles as the perfect Mimi. By now, it was well known that Björling was rather too fond of alcohol, and record producers found him something of a handful. But with a great conductor in charge, he still gave performances which have seldom been equalled and never surpassed. My last example is the love duet which concludes Act One of La Bohème. As the moonlight falls on Mimi's face, Rodolfo bursts into a rapturous expression of love. The orchestra here is conducted by Sir Thomas Beecham, and perhaps it was he who insisted that the final notes are sung correctly, without any absurd competition between soprano and tenor as they go off to the Café Momus.
là fuori. E al ritorno dammi il braccio, mia vicina. Che mani io
You see Björling and Victoria de los Angeles in the love duet from La Boheme by Puccini. This is Robin Gregory and my producer Alan Boyd saying thanks for listening and inviting you to be with us again next week for not one but two great tenors in the series A Tenor Sang.